Growing up, one of my mom's friends would sometimes treat us to a large amount of bapao, these steamed buns filled with sweet beef on the inside. And I loved it because that meant that for the next few days when I would come home from school for lunch, I would get to eat it. And I would rip them apart and dip it in some sweet chili sauce, and it was absolutely delicious. That's what we're going to be making today. So I did some research on where they came from. They were imported, or they came into Indonesia through China, because in China they have these buns called bao, typically filled with red bean paste or sweet pork filling, but the Indonesian version has beef. Hi, I'm Toine. Welcome to my kitchen. If you're new to this channel, I focus on cooking food from my home country, the Netherlands, and some of its former colonies, such as Indonesia. Today, we are making bapao, a steamed bun filled with sweet beef. First, we're going to make the dough, and then we'll go over the ingredients that we use for the filling. You will need a kilo of all-purpose flour, 3 large eggs, 14 grams or 2 packets of yeast, 4 tablespoons of sugar, a pinch of salt, and 400 milliliters of lukewarm water. Try to have it around 110 degrees because we're going to be adding the yeast to that. We have to activate the yeast. So in the water, that should be between 110 and 115 degrees. So let's take a look. We're at 114 degrees. Perfect. We are going to add the sugar. We're going to stir that through a little bit. And the sugar is actually going to feed the yeast even more. You really want this bread to rise quite a bit when it gets steamed. And now we're going to add the yeast. We're going to let this sit for 10 minutes before we make our dough. I'm going to use my stand mixer to knead this dough together. But first, what I want to do is I want to sift the flour into the bowl just to make sure there are no big lumps. Sifted all the flour into the bowl. I'm going to add a pinch of salt, and I'm going to just mix it in the stand mixer for a little bit just to make sure that the salt and the flour are properly incorporated. You don't want to turn this on too high because you want to make sure that the flour stays in the bowl and not all over yourself. While this is going, I'm going to add the eggs, just one at a time. And the last one. Time to add the water and the yeast. I don't know if you can tell, but it is bubbling up quite a bit. So we're now going to add this to the mixture. And we're going to let this go until it forms a smooth ball. I like to scrape down the sides a little bit from time to time to make sure that that flour makes it into the dough as well. While it can be fun to knead by hand, this is definitely a lot quicker and a lot less work. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. Our mixer is done kneading, so what we're going to do now is let this sit in a warm place for an hour to rise. I'm now going to cover this with a damp towel and put this in a warm spot. While the dough is rising, it's time to make the meat filling. For this, you will need 3 tablespoons of ketchup mayonnaise. We've used this a few times right now, but I'll put a link below on how to make it yourself if you can't find it. 750 grams of ground beef, 5 garlic cloves, already peeled because I'm going to grate them, 25 grams of butter, 1 tablespoon of ginger powder and 1 tablespoon of sugar, and 2 onions that I have already peeled and cut in half to make grating easier. You will also need salt and pepper to taste. We're going to grate the onion. Be careful of your fingers while you're doing this, and also this may actually cause you to cry a little like it did when I made the bami goreng. If you don't want to do this by hand, you can of course also use a food processor, which is what I used when we made the hutspot. Now that we have grated all the onion, it's time to do the same with the garlic, but instead of a box grater, we're going to use a microplane. Careful with your fingers because this is pretty sharp. When you use a microplane, there's always going to be some garlic stuck on the bottom, so make sure you scrape that all out because you don't want to have too little garlic in here. There we go. And we're now going to cook that at the stove. We're going to put butter in the pan and let that melt. And then we are going to add grated onion and garlic. And we're going to cook that until it is glassy. We're doing this over medium heat. Now that the butter is melted, we are going to add the onions and the garlic. We are seasoning it after the meat has been added, so right now it is just butter, onion, and garlic. It still smells really good in the kitchen now. You actually don't have to keep stirring this. I like to kind of make it a flat disc that the entire bottom gets contact with the hot pan, and then in a little bit I will stir it around again. The onions are glassy, so now it is time to add the ground beef. We're going to just season it with some salt and pepper. Some salt, some freshly cracked black pepper. And now we are going to cook this and make sure that we break it apart and that the onion and the ground beef gets mixed through thoroughly. Keep stirring until the beef is fully cooked. It is time to add the ginger powder, sugar, and 3 tablespoons of ketchup. We're just going to count it out. 1, 2, 3. And now mix it through. This is done cooking. I'm going to turn off the stove and let it cool off. The dough has finished rising for an hour, so now we have to knead it one more time and let it rise for another 30 minutes. Flour your board just ever so lightly. And then take the dough out of the bowl and onto your board. So the dough is already a lot more supple than it was before we let it rise. And we just want to develop the gluten a little bit more. And it's a workout, you know? That way you don't feel so bad about eating all this food. I'm going to turn it into a ball, and now we're going to put it into a greased bowl, cover it, and let it rise for another 30 minutes. Okay, we're going to grease the bowl a little bit so it doesn't stick. And any oil will do. Put this in here, cover it with the damp towel again, and it's going to go to a warm spot and rise for another 30 minutes. Here's the dough after its second rise, and it's gotten a lot bigger again. And now we have to divide this into 24 even portions. And put it back in here. It is 1,570 grams. Divided by 24 is somewhere between 65 and 66 grams. Okay, so we're going to cut it down the middle first. So basically 12 pieces out of each half. So cut it in half again, and then turn this into 3 pieces that are approximately the same size like that. So this should now be 65 times 2. All right, so it's 113, so it's slightly less. So clearly I didn't divide it evenly, but we're gonna cut this in half and we're gonna turn that into a ball. Ooh, 65, that's perfect. And we're making little balls of dough. So now we're going to flatten the balls so that we can fill them with meat. I use a rolling pin for that. If you are more experienced, you can probably do it by hand, but I like to use a rolling pin for it and just turn it into a decent sized circle so that it can hold a tablespoon of meat. And I like to just do a few of them before I start filling them so I can work a little faster. Put it in your hand, make a little bit of a divot in it, tablespoon of meat, and then pinch it all the way around. And then bring the edges in and turn it into a ball. And you can pinch that again. Repeat this until you have filled all your balls of dough, and then put them in a warm place for another 20 minutes. So as I've been doing this, I have changed my technique a little bit versus what I did in the beginning. Still make a cup with my hand, fill it with the beef, a little more than a tablespoon. At the bottom of the beef, there's a good amount of liquid, so try to not get it too wet. We actually used a tablespoon and another cup to kind of get rid of some of the excess liquid. So now what do I do is I pinch the middle, and then I bring the two sides over and pinch those two seams that are made. So you kind of have a cross with the seams, and then I bring those corners into the middle, pinch that together, roll it on the board, turn it around and pinch the bottom one more time. And that seems to work a lot better than what I did in the beginning. I've made 24 of them. These are going to go in a warm spot as well, rise for 20 minutes. And while that's happening, I'm going to set up the steamer to steam the first batch. The first 12 have finished rising for another 20 minutes, and we're now going to steam them for 25. So I'm going to put them with some space around it on the bottom layer of this steamer. And we won't be able to necessarily steam all 12 at once, but that's okay. Just cover them and let them and wait until the first ones are done. And now we are going to steam this for 25 minutes. It's been 25 minutes. The steamer just went off. Watch out, this is hot steam coming out of here. So some of them have stuck together, so just have to separate them a little bit. Just careful that you don't rip them open. Of course, you don't have to have an electric steamer. You can also just use a large pot with a steamer insert, or if you have a wok with a bamboo steamer insert, you can use that as well. And I have one for me to eat. I already put some sweet chili sauce in a little bowl. So let's cut it open. And you can see that the bread is all the way done, and it has a good amount of meat in there. So let me add a little bit of the sweet chili sauce on top and give it a try. Eet Smakelijk. The bread is fluffy. The meat has just enough sweetness. Everything combined with the sweet chili sauce, which has a little bit of spice to it, as well as some extra sweetness. It's a great combination. I will continue cooking the rest of the bapaos. These are way too many for my wife and I to eat in the next day or two. So what we're going to do is wrap each one of them individually in plastic wrap, and then put those in a zip top bag in the freezer. And then all we do is take one out, pop it in the microwave for a minute, minute and a half, and it makes for a very quick and easy and delicious snack. Sometimes we don't feel like making the bread part of this, and we will just make the beef. And then we do one of two things. We either bake it inside of a little envelope made of puff pastry. You'll get a nice crispy outside and this sweet beef on the inside. Or we buy frozen bao buns that you then pop in the microwave or put in the steamer, and then we just scoop some beef on it, add some scallions and cucumbers, and eat them that way. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the like and subscribe button, and also don't forget to share it with your friends. If you have a question about the recipe, please leave a comment below. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.